Good morning or good whatever time of day it is when you're watching this video. Today is the day when we're making an important decision. If you're new here, my name is Josie. Welcome or welcome back if you've been here before. And I am just about to enter Act 3, hopefully, of my novel that I'm doing the first round of revision on. So it is a mountaineering revenge thriller novel. I've been brought to another halt. Like, I literally just went back and revised like the last, I think it's like 8 chapters. It's really been bothering me and I've kind of been pushing it aside this whole time. But I think it's really important before I enter Act 3 to decide if I'm going to add a romantic subplot to my story. I would say that at this point, there is no romantic subplots, plot lines in this book. Like, it is very much focused on this thriller, on this competition, the mountain, the revenge, but we don't really have a lot of romance. So you might be asking yourself, like, why have a romance in this book if it's not there and maybe doesn't need to be? The plain and simple reason is that I love romance. Like, I love reading romance books, but I also think that romantic subplots happen in almost like every single book. Like, I think that thrillers, mystery, and horror can kind of skirt around having that aspect to it, but I feel like most like sci-fi, fantasy, contemporary books, like, you'd be hard pressed to find one that doesn't have some sort of romantic, arc going on. And also, just romance is really fun, and from a like storytelling perspective, you can add a lot with a romance. Like, it adds another layer of conflict, of tension. It allows you to show a different side to your main character, whoever's involved, that you might not see otherwise. So there's like a lot of good reasons to add this romantic subplot besides just I think it would be fun to have a romance in my book. But that's where I also come to the negatives, the cons, because at this point, my story, the word count is getting a little bit higher than I would want. So I'm just about to start Act 3, and we're just under 70,000 words. So that means that by the end of Act 3, we're probably going to hit like 90,000. And if I have to go in and put in a whole romantic subplot, that would be like extra scenes that aren't there currently. And I'm just worried that it's going to inflate the word count to, who knows, like 100,000 words. And for a thriller, that is a little bit on the long side. And so then I'd have to go back and then see what other scenes I could pare down to accommodate the romantic subplot. And then second reason, maybe not to, and this is what I've been thinking a lot about. It's whether or not this romantic subplot would undermine a lot of my main character's conflicts that she's already going through, her own like internal struggle, because she definitely already has one. And I'm just worried that, romance can often be this like lighter, fluffier thing, and that it could take away from that. And I don't really want to do that. Like, I want to give what she's going through, what she's feeling, the maybe not severity, but the gravity that it deserves. And so I'm worried that putting in a romance could subvert that a little bit or could ruin that a little bit. But I also acknowledge that there's a lot of different ways to write a romance. Like, there's the very straightforward way of having two characters meet for the first time and then get to know each other. Maybe there's conflicts added as they get to know each other and their past and their backstory. But that wouldn't really be the case in this one. I think the trope that is termed for what this character relationship would be is second chance. So they've been together in the past, and so it's like they've been together, they've broken up, and then it's them coming back together in the present day. So I think that that would be more what we're leaning towards. A lot of tropes when it comes to romance, and like, I'm not saying that in a negative way. I love tropes. I think it's really interesting that these days I feel like a lot of readers will lean towards looking for books with specific tropes, almost like they've got like labels on them of like, this is a second chance romance, or this is an enemies to lovers romance, this is a friends to lovers romance, because I feel like it can almost commercialize a lot more the story. But I personally like it because I think it is a very fast, easy way of trying to describe stories that can really be super, super different. So I think the first step to figuring out if this romantic subplot is going to be a strength to my story or if it's just going to cause a whole bunch more headache trying to edit, the first 2 acts to include this, will be to use a beat sheet. So a beat sheet is basically a outline version of, like an arc that you can use to try and figure out the different stages that you need to hit to make a satisfying romantic arc. And so I've really leaned heavily in recent years on using like pre-built outlines and stuff because my instinct is always to like take a really long time to get to stuff when I need to have more of a pace. And so making sure that I hit specific landmarks on a certain time frame really helps me. And I think that I need to be kind of a little bit careful with this because it's not like I'm restarting. When I wrote the first act of this story, I had this potential romance in mind. So I added a lot of the banter and stuff to the first section of it. But then when I was really getting into the meat of the story in Act 2, I kind of just let that drop because I had so many other things I was trying to focus on and work on that it's basically missing from that area. So then I need to figure out what needs to change in that area and whether or not I can use pre-existing conversations and interactions between these 2 characters to build up the romantic subplot, because I really don't want to have to write a whole bunch of new scenes. Like I could write 1 or 2 new scenes, but I don't want to do more than that. So I really need to figure out where in that Act 2 are these beats having to land, and then whether or not it will work, and then as well, what will that mean for the ramifications for Act 3? So I'm about to lead up towards a climax, which is right around when you'd probably get the payoff for a romance. So I need to figure this out before I go to the end because I don't really want to get to the end of the story and then realize I want this romantic subplot and then have to go all the way back through and re-edit 2 whole acts. I've started with some of the notes I've taken from videos from Abby Emmons, and she had one about enemies to lover romance story structure, which it's really great, but I just don't think it'll work for my story. I mean, I knew it wasn't, well, they are enemies, kind of. It's one-sided. But I can't do it because they kind of have it be as like you're hating each other at the beginning, which my character's already there, so we'd start a little bit past that. And then you have forced proximity, which they are forced proximity on this competition. But then it has like them working together and becoming allies in a time of crisis, getting closer, building this friendship. And that can't really, I mean, maybe it could happen. I don't know that I've got like the allies in a time of crisis. I could see myself sort of adapting this, but then I'm also scared that if I try too hard to adapt this, I'm going to get too in my head and things aren't going to feel as like genuine. But I wonder if I could do like the main character is in denial this whole time, right? Like, because this is going to be a spoiler. We're just going to go into spoilers. But my main character wants revenge on this person I'm thinking about putting as the romantic interest. So potentially I could have this push-pull of trying to create this almost friendship while the main character is struggling to continue with their revenge. Maybe that would work actually, because the main character spends a lot of the middle of the book focused on someone else, getting revenge on someone else. So potentially they're not going after this person because they don't want to admit to themselves that they don't want to get revenge on this person anymore. So they're kind of jumping the line to someone else. So I could see that kind of working. Okay, you know what? Yeah, maybe this will work. I don't know why I'm being so pessimistic. I think what I'll do is I'll pull out all these points and then I'm going to go through and see where they fit or where I could potentially adapt certain scenes, because I'm not going to invent completely new conflicts and scenes and plot points for this because no, we're not going to do that. So we're going to see if we can adapt what's already there to this. I'm not going to lie, the one-sided enemies to lovers might work. But I think other than having to come up with maybe one scene that would happen just at the beginning of Act 2, I think I can make most of this pretty integrated with what's already there. Like I can just tweak the conversations and the interactions they have, and then I just need this one spark earlier on when she maybe realizes she might have misjudged him for something, or it reminds her of something from like the past because they did know each other in the past. So maybe, bringing up those emotions. So I think I need like a catalyst for that, and I'm gonna have to figure something out. But other than that, I feel like I can change up Act 3 pretty good to make this payoff work. And then in the rest of this, I feel like, yeah, it's just about tweaking those smaller interactions, like the internal conflict, like how she's thinking about certain things, the way they talk to each other, and that sort of thing. So feeling good, but I don't want to just jump on the first thing I came up with. So I might look up online other ways to do a romance arc just to see if it triggers any other thoughts before I just go full on the first thing I think of, It is a number of hours later, and honestly, I haven't really done that much today. It is a Saturday, so it's not like I have anything I have to do, but I was hoping to like get some writing done today or whatever, but I kind of went down a little bit of a spiral after doing a bit more internet researching about second chance romances in particular, because I really wanted to make sure that I was fulfilling a lot of the expectations that come with that sort of story. So I was looking up a lot of that, and it seemed like one of the big things that people recommend with second chance is that you spend the time to describe what the relationship between the characters was like in the past. That's not a huge problem for me, especially because I actually have a flashback that in the first draft came in the third act, so like right before the climax, and I was actually using it as a bit of like a plot reveal because in the first draft I wasn't explicitly stating their past relationship, even though there are clear hints there. So I kind of decided, oh, it could be like a fun little reveal that they used to like date. Since I've started the second draft, this whole time I've been debating whether that should be part of the climax, because I feel like it would add a lot more tension to know that earlier, and it's not really adding that much. Like, I feel like it almost takes away from everything that comes after it. Like, I don't really need that moment. So, I'm thinking about moving that flashback to earlier, kind of where I needed that moment of remembering their past relationship. So, maybe I could use that flashback as her going back into a memory triggered by something he does in the present day. But that now means that I'm adding more word count to Act 1, taking something out of Act 3 when the second half of the book and Act 3 is already looking pretty sparse. But I've also then thought about, okay, so my midpoint that I have for the story right now, I feel like it's a little bit late in the story, but I could create a new midpoint using this romance subplot as kind of the catalyst for a new midpoint. And then what I have as my midpoint now could just be, I don't know, a plot point happening in the second half of Act 2. As you can see, I think I'm making good progress towards what the final story should look like with all these developmental edits, but it means that I really want to make forward progress, get towards the climax, but now I've been debating, and that's where the spiral came in, going back, because I want to make sure that these things, before I forget them, are in the draft somewhere, even if they're not in a clear format. But then also, I would love for this draft to be pretty clean. Like, that's the reason I've gone back through this second half of Act 2 multiple times before going on, and I just feel like I've been entering this never-ending loop. But it's worth it. I feel like it's worth it. And I mean, I'll probably say this again later when something else comes up, but I feel like this is the last big thing. When I went into this draft, I had made myself a list of all the things that need to be changed, and then from there I selected what I would focus on in this draft. And I feel like I've tangentially changed quite a bit for the other things too. And so I think instead of having nice discrete drafts, I'm just combining so much stuff into this one. But, you know, every novel I write is a different process, and we're just accepting it at this point. But yeah, so I'm debating how much should I go back to change stuff? Should I get to the end of the story and then go back? And then is it still draft 2? Does it even matter? Drafts are just an abstract concept we create. Like, there is no one set definition of a draft. I can do whatever I want, but I really want to try and get to the climax because I'm in this rut. So, but one thing is clear. I think I really want to do this romance subplot. I think it's going to add a lot. And honestly, when I first got the idea for this storyline, the romance had a lot more of an impact. Like, I built it around a potential romance between two characters. And as time went on, I was building out their backstories. I decided to kind of drop that a little bit more, and then I didn't really know what I was going to do with it. Now it's back. Like, that's why I think it was always on my mind to add the romance back in somehow. I didn't exactly know how I wanted to do it. Adding this romantic subplot didn't end up being very much of a question. I mean, I feel like I kind of always knew I was going to do it, even when I was posing the question kind of at the beginning of this video. But I think a lot of my hesitation did just come from another layer of plot, another layer to keep track of. And I think it'll be worth it. And I just had to convince myself that it would work. And there's a few more things I need to brainstorm and figure out, like what's going to be that catalyst in the first part of the story that triggers the past relationship, or how I'm going to make everything unravel in the climax. Like, I know generally, but really trying to understand what's happening in those moments. And there's going to be a lot of work going back in and altering a lot of their interactions, deciding which interactions the main character has with other characters that can then be turned into him to have more of those moments. But I think it's all going to be worth it. And I think, though, for my own sanity, I'm going to move that flashback to make it easier on myself later on, and maybe do a little bit before and after to try and like smooth it out. And then I'm going to return to the very beginning before I finish this draft to do one more pass through and make sure that this romantic subplot is actually making sense, interwoven. I'm a little nervous for writing the end of and the payoff of this without having gone through the whole story with them and kind of understood the build-up, because I think that may add some complication and more edits at the end. But I just think for my own sanity, I need to do it this way. So, time to get to Act 3.